Yes, indeed. This is Download This Show, your guide to the week in technology, the internet and culture. My name is Mark Fennell, and congratulations. By the end of this episode, we will have solved piracy. Maybe. Also, we're going to talk Facebook. Just how creepy is Facebook messing with your mind, running experiments? Also, do you even care that they're running experiments on people's moods? And a French designer who has found a way to marry the best of digital music with the best of physical music. The return of album covers. We're going to work through that in a few moments. But first, allow me to introduce this week's panel. He is a senior reporter with ZDNet Australia, Josh Taylor. Welcome back.
Great to be back in the new filming.
Yes. Now we can see just how high you are. He's actually sitting down. Josh sitting down compared to us standing up. This is what it looks like. And next to him, we have science, technology and consumer journalist, Wendy Zuckerman. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
It was revealed this week that back in 2012, January 2012, Facebook ran an experiment on 680,000 different Facebook accounts. And the goal of the experiment, Wendy, was to measure whether emotion was contagious. Exactly how did it work?
Well, with great difficulty, and there's been obviously a lot said about this study from people who I would question whether they have read the study.
You've read the whole thing, haven't you?
I've read the whole thing, and it's actually quite short, so I would encourage people to do it. What the researchers did is they took just under 700,000 Facebook users, and they tweaked some of their news feeds so that they were shown sometimes more positive news reports versus sometimes more negative news reports, and then they had a control where they just removed some of their news feeds willy-nilly. And how they decided what was a positive or negative news report, and by that I don't mean just a news site, but it could be anything that anyone put on their feed, was based on the words that were used, which is obviously you run into trouble with people saying things like, I'm not happy, and that has the happy word in it and the not word in it. So we have some conflict there. But
so if in January you wrote not happy Jan, you would have just thrown the algorithm right out.
Right out. And then what they wanted to do was to say, well, we've tweaked this system. How does that then affect how people respond to Facebook? Does this mean that they then write more negative things if they're seeing more negative content, and vice versa? And in that way, they wanted to test whether emotions were contagious. Now, you have some issues with this study already in the fact that just because people are using negative words, it doesn't mean it's having any effect on their emotions whatsoever. Anyone who's used Facebook knows that, for one, you could write, oh, this sucks, but you actually don't care and you go on with your life and it has no effect on you whatsoever. And on the other side of it, sometimes you just love to hate. You're like, yeah, that sucks. And that kind of makes you happy in this weird false Facebook world. So this is what they did. And the researchers ultimately found, whilst their results were statistically significant, that by tweaking the news feeds, they affected 1 in every 1,000 words that people wrote. So if they got more positive feeds, 1 in every 1,000 words was more positive. Enter the fury.
Well, okay, there was fury. There's been very significant fury, but and I think the thing that's most interesting is that they've had to apologise. So Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer, did an apology on an Indian television. One of the actual researchers themselves put a Facebook post up, of all things, apologising. How did they not see this coming, that people, once they saw it, were going to be offended and feel like they were having their brains messed with?
Yeah, I don't understand Facebook's logic behind that. Obviously, it was quite a while ago. I think it was 2012 that it was done. So it was before the sort of the rise of the anti-Facebook movement, the whole, shut down your Facebook profile page there. I think that happened in 2013 around about. So it's basically come out of nowhere. And it's basically confirmed all people's sort of fears of Facebook, but whether that's actually justified or not, like Wendy said, it's like not actually.
To some extent, though, they must have known that people were going to react this way, because about 4 months in May 2012, after they'd done the experiment, they actually changed their data use policy, and they introduced this line that they can use your information for internal operations, including troubleshooting, data analysis, testing, research, and service improvement. So they must have sensed that they had stepped outside the bounds of their existing rules and changed it accordingly.
Well, I think the interesting thing with our relationship with Facebook is that they can write whatever they want in those rules. It doesn't affect how people feel about the way that Facebook is using their information. And I think that does sort of stem into the issue here, because people interact with Facebook, they put so much information on there, and then they feel somehow abused and manipulated to find out that Facebook is in fact a company that's trying to make money. Perhaps in a legal sense, it matters what they put in their terms and conditions. But in the way that people respond to Facebook and what Facebook does. It doesn't really matter. I think the fury that's come from this is very little to do with what this ultimately controlled study was about, but people's inability to control what Facebook is doing with their information. And I think there was a really great comment on New Scientist where a psychologist said, I think perhaps the sort of lightning rod that this paper has become is a bit misplaced.
I was going to say, do you think it's not about what information people are putting on Facebook, but the information they're receiving from Facebook? I mean, Facebook is essentially manipulating what they see as an individual user. So that's a little bit different from the information that they upload. Whether, like you said before, whether it actually has an effect on them, I think, what a status a person puts up on Facebook may not actually reflect the reality of what they're feeling. But I do think that, Facebook manipulating what people can see and get from the site is kind of something they should be worried about.
But surely any major social network must run continual experiments on what gets the best reactions. I know social media producers who have nothing to do with Facebook specifically, but deal with all of them, who are constantly running experiments on their fan pages and their followings about what's going to get the greatest engagement. Is this really that different to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, all this information is going to feed back into is to tell marketers what they need to put in their Facebook posts to get more people to sign up and like it and go through and buy whatever product they're selling on Facebook. That's essentially what Facebook is doing for it. And I think that, the research will probably be quite useful for that. And I don't think it's really out of the norms. I think just the way that it's been talked about has sort of made people feel like it's manipulating their emotions.
Facebook has been curating the newsfeed for a very long time just because people are posting so many things on there. And to increase people's engagement, that's sort of the word that Facebook uses, to get you on the site as often as possible, they are deciding what they think you're going to engage with and what is most relevant to you. And so this study just fits perfectly into what they've been doing for some time. It's just in this case, they published it in a journal and explained all of their methods.
Yeah, at least this time we know what they did.
And still they can't get advertising right. I still get ads for like Christian singles or big ribs and things like that.
No,
not quite.
Yeah, right. There have been some real ramifications beyond just people being annoyed. I know a couple of European countries are launching privacy investigations and whether or not they broke local rules. But looking at it on a macro level, what's the impact for Facebook here? I mean, people aren't going to delete their accounts over this. They're just not, are they?
Yeah, that's the thing. The biggest thing that people can do is talk with their feet and go find another service. But where are you going to go? There's
10 years of your photos, connections, they all live on that space. People
and Google Twitter, Google, they're all doing these same experiments as well. They're all trying to increase our engagement and our want to go on those sites. And they're doing the same thing. So, I mean, on one hand, I think given that we're already in this space where we're getting highly curated experiences, maybe it's not that bad that they're running these experiments, because if, for example, Facebook had found that there was a genuinely quite remarkable response, that if Facebook, say, put lots of happy news reports on people's sites, then they could genuinely make people feel a lot happier. That would give Facebook, and I don't know if I would want Facebook to have that much power, but it would start a new discussion about whether we could actually increase the happiness of the population using Facebook as a newsfeed. Or perhaps you could take this research further and say, if they showed that if you gave people news from really valid sources, such as the ABC or New York Times, instead of say giving them just sort of clickbait from anywhere, maybe you made people more satisfied. So there is the potential for good here. It's just really unfortunate that Facebook does not have a history of using their great power with great responsibility.
She meant to include ZDNet in the list of trusted
sources. Of course, I
did. The ideal situation would be informed consent, where users would have the option to opt in or opt out. The problem with this sort of experiment is that if people know that they're being tested on, their reaction's going to be changed.
Yeah, the observation changes the observe.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that they can't really do without not telling people. It's a kind of a conundrum that Facebook is stuck in, I think.
So here's a hypothetical. If you were Facebook and you were observing this shift of public opinion against Facebook, what would you be doing to bring people back on side? What are the sorts of things Facebook could do to bring people back on side, do you think?
I think they're doing a lot of it. Like, if you look at some of the way they're trying to be transparent about all the changes, I think that's helping it a lot. And obviously,
except for this one time.
Except for this one time. That was 2 years ago, and everyone found out about it. It was terrible. But also, you see them posting Facebook posts and being quite upfront and frank about why they do. I think that's a conscious look at saying, well, we don't want this to get out of hand and people to start switching away from the network.
Yeah, I think just being more transparent and not leaning on these terms and conditions which run to, what is it, around 10,000 words. I think any time that Facebook says, but it was in our terms and conditions and you agreed to this, everyone goes, what is that? So I think moving towards transparency, which they have said they're doing. And I think moving away from this model, which is going to be incredibly difficult, but moving away from the model of scraping our data and selling us junk.
Yeah, I don't see that happening anytime ever. Not so much soon, but ever.
I don't see it happening, but whether they could possibly move to just a payment scheme. If perhaps people were so angry and irate at Facebook for trying to get more money and for running these types of experiments, ultimately Facebook could say, okay, you can pay $10 a month and we will not track your data or sell you anything.
Well, there is that social network that you can pay for, app.net, that the whole model is like a subscription model. You pay to join on and then they won't do anything with your data. Yeah. We covered that about a year and a half ago. I've not heard from it since. Yeah. Which is an indication of how that's going. All right, download this show is what you're watching. And still to come, the man who spent millions of dollars lobbying the federal government to change piracy laws. What will those laws be? He'll outline what he thinks they should be. But right now, do you miss album covers? Do you miss being able to hold physical records? Well, a French designer has come up with something called Qleeks. And basically what they're designed to marry the best of digital music with physical music. It's a tiny little hexagonal piece of wood. And within that is an NFC chip, a near-field communications chip, which will actually allow you to access your Spotify or audio playlists of movie. You just put it in a player and it hooks up to your television and your television instantly links up to whatever playlist that is. It's called Qleeks and the individual things are called taps, but would you ever actually want to use it?
I think there's definitely a market there for people who have a nostalgia for physical things and who are kind of sick at looking at the screens when they go home. But I don't think it's ever going to go viral. I just think that there's probably a few niche groups out there that would be interested in something like Qleek.
I sense you want to say hipsters, douchebags.
Yeah, right. Not douchebags. There's no judgment here. But definitely if you have skinny jeans and live in a terrace house, you are more likely to buy
I now
this
cross
product.
to our official hipster correspondent immediately to the left. Josh, this kind of looks like it works for you.
Yeah, I think it looks like a nice idea. I can imagine having it in my house, but at the same time, my DVDs are gathering dust. I don't go anywhere near them because that effort of moving it from the shelf, putting the DVD in and playing it, it's just too much. I can just go stream it online or have a digital copy of it. And I think that that's where we're still at. I mean, it's nice to have sort of the physical memories, but at the same time, convenience, I think, ultimately wins.
See, this is what I think is kind of interesting about this, because his argument is that he's managed to bring back some of the beautiful elements of physicality of music and media without losing the convenience of digital. So if you still want to have access to a Spotify playlist on your phone, you can just press it like that, whereas this is a physical way of accessing it on top of that. Do you think he's managed to marry the best of physical and the best of digital together effectively?
I think what will need to happen to make it pick up is for it to be interoperable on a number of systems and very easy to just sort of pick up and play on multiple systems. I think the thing that is probably going to get lost in it, I mean, near-field communications means that it can probably be accessed on multiple different systems, but until you have a friend who also has one and all your friends have the same system and it's, you can go take it to the shopping center and do the same thing, it's going to kind of be difficult, I think, for people to be sharing this sort of stuff.
Built into this project is this notion that there is people missing physical access to media, cover art and things like that. Do you think that's real? Do you think that exists?
I think that many of us still have this idea that we want our identity to surround us. So we want things that represent who we are to be in our homes. And this kind of very much taps into that. So these days, I suppose your playlist would represent who you are, but it's probably not enough for some people. They want to bring a guy or a girl home and have them flipping through their Qleek album. but I'm not sure that we miss it that much. And then there's also this kind of other component where having things digital, it might not be so nostalgically cool, but it's very good for the environment. All of these kind of physical things, which might be lovely in memory, they're not carbon neutral. There's wood in this. You're going to be posting it. It's going to be transported. It has to be made. And so,
as opposed to the coal fire that pumps through the electricity system that runs the internet and your
which would
computers.
still be necessary for a product like Qleek.
Oh, right. Okay, I see what you've done there. Okay.
It's definitely not going to be some revelatory technology.
It's something that could be adapted, though. Once 3D printers become a lot cheaper and more people can do it, they could probably end up printing out their own version of it and then just using that.
Hey, Josh Taylor up top for thinking. You should be consulting these guys. Oh, also one of the things that did strike me as being quite nice is this notion that they've got this kind of stand thing that you can put up on a wall, and you can actually put your album artwork on the wall and treat it as art, which I actually thought was a really nice usage of the form and function. But do you think anyone other than idiots like me would ever actually want to do that?
I know people were looking for that 70s sci-fi futuristic apartment look, I think. Would probably go for it.
Yeah. After this, I'll go get turned into soil and green when I'm done putting my Qleeks on the wall. All right, let us know if this is the sort of thing you'd ever want to do. Would you use Qleek? Let us know using the hashtag download this show. We are in the studio here with Josh Taylor from ZDNet Australia and Wendy Zuckerman, science, technology and consumer journalist. My name is Mark Fennell. And finally, here on Download This Show, if you're a fan of TV shows like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, or that last season of Arrested Development, you might be excited to find out that the company behind it, Netflix, the streaming company, might be getting ready to come to Australia.
Netflix are coming. They're talking to our people about the supply of products, so they are opening and coming to Australia. The overwhelming bulk of product, all feature films, and the overwhelming bulk of television product is available on iTunes and the 9 or 10 other services that have opened. That's all happening and prices are coming down. So there is legally available product at increasingly lower prices.
Now, that is the voice of Graham Burke, who is the head honcho at the film studio Village Roadshow Australia, speaking to Josh Taylor at ZDNet. Now, he's kind of described that Netflix is coming, but a lot of those shows we talked about, Orange is the New Black, House of Cards, they already have deals to go on Foxtel and things like that. So when Netflix comes to Australia, what is it actually going to look like? Because it might not necessarily be what people think it's going to be, Josh.
I think it'll be a lot like what QuickFlix is now, and minus the HBO content, which QuickFlix has managed to secure, because essentially what you've got is, like you said, a lot of content deals already signed up with Foxtel and with a whole bunch of other players in the market. And Netflix is basically coming in as the new player with basically no customers, apart from all those ones who are getting it through other ways. But they're basically working from nothing. They've got to build it up. That's why apparently there's 2 executives in Australia at the moment who are going around talking to all these movie people like Graham Burke and others to sort of start to sign these sorts of deals. And I think if you look at where Netflix has just launched in Europe, they don't actually have access to their own TV shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, because that is actually locked up with traditional cable TV providers, and they've got an exclusivity window, which means it's going to be very, very hard for them to actually get all the content that they want.
Is this all a huge mistake? Should you not launch in a country if you can't even launch with your own TV shows? Is that just like a terrible look, Wendy?
I don't think it's a terrible look. Netflix has become so popular in word. People love talking about it. It has such a great reputation that I get the feeling that even if it came online without such a great product, people would still want to be involved.
Netflix has essentially become this catch cry phrase with the way to stop piracy, and it's something that people say, well, I download torrents because Netflix isn't available here, but we do have a lot of the similar sort of services coming online now, and the Netflix that people are expecting probably won't live up to the hype.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if people are downloading things like Game of Thrones, they've got to recognise that even in the US, Netflix doesn't have Game of Thrones within 24 hours. You're in the same situation. So as a catch-cry argument, it doesn't hold at all, does it?
No, and I think people are going to be sorely, sorely disappointed when Netflix launches here and it doesn't have everything that they want on it. And I think that there'll probably be some sort of new line of argument saying, well, we want Netflix and everything that has in the US, which is a legitimate argument. I mean, if you were starting from scratch with entertainment deals now, you do it on a global basis all at once, so you can get all markets covered all at once. But unfortunately, we've still got that legacy of like old content deals for like VHS, DVD era type stuff.
Is there anyone actually doing that, though? Because, I mean, you'd think that Netflix is probably, and Yahoo and Hulu, all of those kind of big streaming services taking off in the US at the moment. You'd think they're the most forward-thinking media organisations in the world. And even those guys, to sustain themselves, are still doing global deals with individual cable companies like the Foxtels of the world. So even they aren't doing it. So how far are we away from a media organisation being confident enough and liquid enough to be able to do these global deals? We're going to go out all at once. How far away is that?
I still think it's a fair few years away. I think it's something that, you have to have someone come in as a major disruptor, which is the internet, and then you have to begin to unwind all these deals as they're slowly doing now. I think Netflix's biggest mistake was actually selling off its own TV shows. I don't think they should have done that. They should have just waited until they were ready to launch in those markets and then just forego the revenue. But obviously, they need the cash as well. And then markets like Australia, which aren't that big, are a nice little money maker for them if they sell it to Foxtel.
And of course, Graham Burke is, as the head of Village Roadshow, a fervent anti-piracy campaigner. And with that, they've been lobbying the federal government a lot to make massive changes to the way piracy is legislated around. And for the first time, you actually got him to describe what he thinks anti-piracy legislation should look like. And if you're wondering what that is, it's this.
They'd start with a notice to people saying, are you aware that this is not a victimless crime, that other people will lose their jobs, production people in theatres, people in television stations. We believe it should lead to slowing down of the speed. That ISPs and IINet, who are the principal screamers, that's what they do on a regular basis. They sell you a plan, and if you're exceeding that plan, they slow your speed down until you pay more money. Of course, the copyright owners will contribute to that cost, but if you're making a car and profiting from that car, and it goes out on the road and the car's killing people and it needs to be modified, well then you're not going to say, hey, I'm not going to change my car because it's going to cost me money. There has to be a sharing of costs.
All right, so that was just one of many amazing analogies that he embarked upon there.
I love that analogy is supposed to make your argument clearer.
You did clarify him later that perhaps IINet regard themselves less as the car and more as the road.
Yeah, essentially, because they're just providing a means for people to get access.
Or perhaps the wet tar before it's hardened on the road.
There was also another argument about airports as well. I don't want to get stuck in analogies because it actually doesn't help. But, okay, so if we're talking about a scenario where people get a letter first and then it's a graduated response and then ultimately it ends up in people's internet being slowed down, are there any cases for that working around the world?
They always point to the US and that their copyright system has just gotten up and they're still in the process of alerting people and trying to deter them. The figures around these sorts of things are always incredibly rubbery. You see some reports saying it's being effective, other reports saying, oh yeah, it implemented and people started buying stuff from iTunes, but it also coincided at the same time as iTunes was more available in that country. So it depends who you talk to on these sorts of things. It's really something that's hard to sort of determine. I think New Zealand has a similar sort of system, but theirs operates on a fine that you go to a copyright tribunal for. And yeah, the figures around that about whether it's actually effective is hard to sort of get a hold of. The thing that people often say in defense of that is that there's no silver bullet argument. It's just one means to sort of try to stop people from doing it in the first place.
Famously, the example that anti-piracy people put up, downloaders, is France. People saying that the rules in France around slowing people's internet and fines didn't work there. Did they stack up those arguments?
Similar sort of argument. Okay, that's the music one, essentially. Is although it looked like there had been a drop, it also coincided with availability of Spotify and things like that in the country, so it was really hard to tell. By
the way, on the topic of just how much money that Village Roadshow have given to both sides of Parliament, this is what Graham had to say.
I don't want to comment on that.
I'll bet you don't. Wendy, in terms of a way forward, because let's be honest, piracy is actually something that should be dealt with. There should be a better situation for users to get content as they want it and for people to get paid. What's the pathway out for you? Because clearly it's going to require a suite of solutions.
Yeah, I think what's really nice here is that we are seeing a trend towards at least a discussion about solutions that aren't this grabbing someone and whipping them to death. We've got one copyright infringer and we've proven it.
Make a note here that whipping is out and we are not doing that.
I mean, in the US, they had these cases, it was a single mother and they would take her to court for everything she's got. And this was supposed to be a massive fear campaign to stop everyone from committing piracy. And it obviously didn't work because you got one individual out of the millions out there who were downloading illegally. And so at least now we're moving to these softer solutions, things like slowing down the internet or sending out letters that you're not going to be fined these incredible sums. Instead, it'll be a little bit like running a red light. Maybe $100 fines, something a bit weaker, but whereas it can be sent out on a mass scale, so you don't need these massive court cases.
The whole idea of letters and education notices is basically so that for grandma who their grandson might be downloading things, the letter is to inform them to say, hey, can you actually make sure that they're not doing this kind of thing? And that's sort of the idea. So you're not ending up with film studios taking grandmas to court trying to get money for it. I think what's interesting is that the Attorney General George Brandis is talking quite strongly about Australia is the worst in the world, pirates, things like that. But if you actually look at the communications department, which is responsible for the ISPs and overseeing them, they're actually taking a much more softer approach. And from documents I've been able to obtain under Freedom of Information, I've been able to determine that the communications department is looking at not only the education responses and everything like that, but also like making sure content is available legitimately and at a fair price, because they want to actually kill that side of the argument that people are only doing this because there's not available content. Now, what's available and what the price is still to be determined. They could say you should have a Foxtel subscription, but not everyone agrees with that. So I think there's still a lot of debate to be had.
See, this is where I think this gets interesting. I think it's much easier to legislate around the stick than it is to legislate around the carrot. So it's this end of shaping people's internet, kind of makes sense. But in terms of changing the market and orientating it around what customers actually want is actually a far more complicated situation. So, it's not just people wanting Game of Thrones instantly. It also feeds into movies and whether movies are available day and date online as they are in cinemas. And that's a very complicated ask. Has anybody done any research into exactly what the ideal situation is for customers? What is it they want? Do they want everything available online and in cinemas at the same time? Do they want day and date for every...
Customers want everything and they want it now and they want it for free. And they will make lies and arguments that go up their own asses in order to do that. I mean, I think...
But there's got to be a line though, right? There's got to be you can shift the situation so far that people will pay, because we've seen that in music. People will pay because music is more convenient to get, on your phone instantly. It's easier than torrenting if you can do it on your phone and online. So there is a line that can be reached, surely.
There is a line, but I think there is also a lot of talk about how the movie and the music industry is suffering from piracy, but we haven't really seen it borne out. We know in theory, obviously, they're losing all of this income from people doing illegal downloads, but yet at the same time, we're still seeing lots of albums being made, lots of movies being made, and perhaps this surrounds the education campaign where we really need to see the blood that we have created through these illegal downloads.
That's the problem with a lot of the research around how much piracy is actually costing people, because you don't have a one-to-one ratio. For every download, that person may not have gone to see the movie or bought the album or anything like that. So
which
you can't
even
really
he
count.
acknowledges.
Yeah, he does. But you can't really put a figure on how much it's actually costing me. It is costing them, no doubt, but to the degree that they actually want is questionable.
It was notable in that interview that you did with him, which, by the way, we will link to, and you can read the whole thing, is that even he doesn't have a full estimate on the impact of piracy. The numbers are very fuzzy. He says, we make $2.6 billion worth of films in Australia. If that piracy thing isn't nailed, it's over. But that's to suggest that if people pirate, the entire industry will go under, which actually doesn't make sense. I mean, they are still making, in certain kinds of films and certain genres of films, they're making more money now than they have in history. So it's actually very hard to identify which parts of the industry are being affected by it. But again, I do want to drill down to this idea that there is things that the market can do. What would be the ideal scenario for you as a consumer to make you, and I'm not suggesting that Josh downloads, but what would be an ideal scenario for you in the way the market operates?
I think the ideal market would be to have a completely globalized media market where everything that is available in the US and in other parts of the world are available to everyone in the world at the same time. So as soon as a show airs in the US, you can go and buy a digital copy of that online straight away, or have it queued up, downloading, ready for you when you get home. And then you paid for it, you watched it. I do that already with Daily Show and Colbert Report, which is on iTunes for quite cheap, and that's the way I view it. And I think if everything was available like that on a subscription basis, people would be much more willing to pay for it.
And what's stopping that?
I guess it's all of these things that we discussed earlier. It's really difficult to make these contractual arrangements with whoever owns that data, for how long it's going to be available for. What's causing the delays, I'm guessing it's wrapped up in a tangled mess of contracts.
So what would it take to untangle it? Any guesses? I know we're talking deep hypotheticals here, but seriously, if we, look 5-10 years down the future, what would it take? How bad would the piracy situation have to be before they change the way they operate?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, it would have to be so bad that they would have to change their business model. I mean, things move slowly in the world of contracts, and so they would really have to see a benefit in moving into this new world of on-demand. And perhaps, I mean, Netflix hasn't been around for that long. Maybe they don't have the data to show that this is actually an effective strategy, and so they're not willing to break away from these contracts that have really saved them for the last couple of decades.
So we've got these anti-siphoning laws in place for sports games, so they have to air on freeware and things like that at certain times, and that's basically to keep people happy, not having to pay for a Foxtel subscription. Why don't we just apply that to content and say, these things like shows like Game of Thrones and things like that are so popular that Foxtel can't have an exclusivity contract on it. It has to be open up to multiple platforms, and other players can bid and air it when they want as well.
All right, well, we have definitely solved piracy there. If you have an ideal situation for you as a customer, please let us know down in the comment section below. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, while you are watching this on YouTube, you should absolutely subscribe to Radio National on YouTube. Very big thank you to this week's panel, Josh Taylor from ZDNet Australia.
Thanks for having me again.
And Wendy Zuckerman, science, technology, consumer journalist you can see everywhere from the Saturday paper to the checkout. She's extremely prolific. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
My name has been Mark Fennell, and thank you for watching another episode of Download This Show.